From your local Houston BMW Center studios, welcome to the Public Affairs Podcast, addressing local issues that affect our nation and shape our world. I'm your host, KG Smooth, and I am joined by the luxurious
You're so sweet.
Uncle Funky Larry Jones. How you doing?
KG, it's good to be with you as always, sir. And we say good morning to all of our veterans and men and women of the military, law enforcement who listen every week, and those of you overseas listening on the app, and of course through myhoustonmagic.com. We absolutely love you. And sir, we have a very positive program today.
And that's what we're about. We're about spreading love, positivity, just a new outlook. And the gentleman that we have on the phone line is a life coach, an optimist, an entrepreneur, and a philanthropist. And so we want to welcome Coach Michael Taylor to the Public Affairs Podcast. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, guys. Absolutely excited to be on the show. Uncle Funky, man, I've been listening to you for so many years. It's an honor to be on the show with you.
I appreciate that, sir. I appreciate that. It means everything to me to hear you say that, man. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yeah. Your new book, inspirational book called The Good News Is The Future is Brighter Than You Think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For those of us in a certain area in life, it really, really is. So before we get into the book and all things Coach Taylor, just tell us about yourself real quick, a little quick background on you.
Well, I like to consider myself as an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible.
Oh, my.
And yet, I was born in the inner city project of Corpus Christi, Texas, to a single mom with 6 kids, and we were basically the poster children for poverty back in the 60s. And when I was in the 11th grade, I dropped out of high school, which was a really poor decision. But fortunately, I landed a job with a building supply center. I worked extremely hard, climbed the corporate ladder, and by the age of 23, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids, and all of that. And within approximately a 6.5-year time frame, the American dream turned into the American nightmare, as I went through a divorce, a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a deep state of depression. I was homeless for 2 years living out of a car. And during the darkest period of my life, I received a miracle. I was sitting up late one night because I was too depressed to sleep. And I was sitting at the edge of my bed looking across the room at my bookshelf when I happened to notice every book on my bookshelf had something to do with getting rich or making money. And as I looked at those books, this question just popped in my head. Michael, what if you took all the energy and effort you've used in trying to get rich and simply figure out how to be happy? And it was that simple question that literally changed my life, because I stopped reading books on getting rich and making money. I started reading books on psychology, philosophy, spirituality, metaphysics, and I was able to rebuild my life. And in doing so, I wanted to share the lessons that I learned with others, and so I started writing back in 1995. And here we are today, 9 books later, with my new book.
Michael, we're overjoyed. You are you are exactly who we needed this early morning, and our audience is going to absolutely love you, because your story is one
it's right up our driveway. Like, I'm laughing. Yeah. I'm not laughing at you. I am laughing with you. That's because joy. It's just joy. Just hearing everything that you just said it just resonates, and that's why I just started laughing. The spirituality, the metaphysics, you hit the words, and I'm like.
and you walk right into both of our lives, because the American dream turned into the American nightmare for me.
Right. Yeah.
Twice.
All of that. And all of that, obsession with money and how you let that go away. Like, that's why I was like, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, he's one of us too.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
This is wonderful. I'm sorry. We are truly overjoyed. So how did that make you feel once all of that came to you and you realized that this ain't living, this ain't the way? Let me turn this obsession into making money, into how to be more happy and help people. Like, what was that process like for you? Was it a slow drip? Did it all happen just, all of the sudden, I mean, meaning the realization, of course, with everything that you were going through in your life, that was, the prequel to your ascension. So yes, go ahead.
In that moment, when I asked myself that question, I wish I could explain in words the feeling. It's like, the universe has a way of getting our attention when we aren't doing what we were put on the planet to do. And so it is my belief that everything happens for a reason. So as I look back over my life, what I realized, as difficult and as painful as my divorce was, it was the absolute best thing that ever happened to me. Because what it challenged me to do for the first time was to stop looking outside of myself and to start looking within to figure out what was it about Michael Taylor that was keeping him from being happy. And so that question, when I went on this journey, it began with, number one, me gaining the courage to go to therapy, to look at and to address some issues that I didn't even know I had. Because as I mentioned, I was successful by society standards. And if anyone would have asked me, Michael, are you happy with your life? I would say, yeah, man, I got it all together. But the truth was, I had a lot of unresolved emotional conflict that I needed to get through. And so gaining the courage to first go to therapy, which was what opened the door for my personal transformation, because it helped me understand how a lot of traumatic experiences I had as a kid were still impacting my life as an adult. And so in addressing those issues, that's how I became free. That's how I was able to connect with my authentic self and to become genuinely happy with my life. So it's been a process that I know which has been divinely guided. And so now I'm doing my part in sharing those lessons as part of my purpose.
What's the title of the new book again, Michael?
The good news is the future is brighter than you think.
What would you say to someone that will say, I hear you, brother, but I don't even want to bite on this. I just came out of a divorce, froze out of my house, still waiting on the stimulus check. Nothing's going my way. How can you be so optimistic for me when I don't feel it myself? What's your response to him?
My response is, I've been there. I know exactly how he feels, how you feel. I've been there. So what I have come to know is that the most important thing that we will ever do as a human being is to simply take 100% responsibility for our lives turning out the way we want it to. So no matter how difficult.
And I don't want to cut you off, Michael, and yet that step of responsibility, that owning up to it, that's tough for a lot of people. That's real tough.
It's extremely difficult. It is extremely difficult. But
the main thing that humans don't want to do. It's the main thing that humans don't want to do.
If you refuse to do that, your life cannot change.
Exactly.
It isn't until you take that first step, saying, if it's to be, it's up to me. Once I make that declaration, then I can start moving in a direction of changing my life. But if I don't do that, I can't change my life. It all begins right there.
So, Michael, the old phrase, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, would that apply to the enlightenment to some folk that everything they've tried has failed? Let me pick up Michael's book and say, you know what? Things are not as bad as they seem.
Well, the very first chapter is called Being Human. And in that chapter, I share how when I was at that lowest point in my life, how I was able to change my thinking, which allowed me to change my actions. And it all begins with how we think. Because if we are stuck in this cycle of negative thinking about our situation, it's only going to create more negative experiences in our life. If we can shift our way of thinking, if we can shift our way of seeing the situation that we're in, then we can begin changing it. Now, as a motivational speaker, I know how difficult it can be for someone to be listening to me on stage talking about, how my life is great right now. But as I mentioned, I was homeless for 2 years, living out of a car, okay? But even during those dark periods, I'm sitting in the back seat of my car where I slept, and I had these little sticky notes. And I would stick these little sticky notes on the seat in front of me. And one of the sticky notes I said was, I am going to become a best-selling author. Now, think about that. I'm in the backseat of a car. I have no job, no money, but I had this imagination. I had this dream, this vision of what I wanted to become. Well, I first had to take responsibility for my ability to become an author. So it began with my commitment to myself that I was responsible for my life, and then started creating little goals to help me get there. And eventually I was able to get out of that situation. And if I can get out of that situation, anyone listening to this program can do it also.
You listen to the Public Affairs Podcast, and we are talking to Coach Michael Taylor. He is the president and CEO of Creation Publishing Group. And his new book, The Good News Is, The Future is Brighter Than You Think, is available right now. I want to get into the divine intelligence and evolution. What divine intelligence as the creator of the universe, how do you tackle that in the book?
Well, it is my belief that there is a divine intelligence that created and is still creating this amazing universe that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this divine intelligence goes by a lot of different names. Some people call it God, some people call it the universe, some people call it Buddha, some people call it Jesus. You have all these different titles and labels, but I think they all point to the same thing.
Same source.
There is a divine intelligence that our source, absolutely, there's a source of all things. And I believe we must develop an intimacy and a connection with this divine intelligence. And this intimacy and connection is what connects us to source. And when we do that, we have access to everything that divine intelligence wants to move through us.
And it is happening right now with the movement of the earth just being shifted in a different part of the galaxy, with people, they need to pay attention as to what's going on in the skies. I mean, just the events that are happening up above, this, how pink and purple the skies look now when the sun sets, like all of this plasma, they keep bringing us stuff down here in this earth. And that's why the ascension is happening with folks.
We believe, Michael, that it's always been there, but at some point of emptying out and getting away from the old you really open up a new vessel to receive all of that. And I'm pretty much saying, I believe what I'm saying is just what you just finished saying, is that once you get rid of this egotistical you and say, you know what, let me assess where my weaknesses are. Let me forgive some things. Let me move some stuff out of the way. And I now have an idea that I want to be this world-renowned author or illustrator or architect or engineer or oceanographer or whatever you want to be. And during the meditation, things begin to happen. Am I close with you, sir?
Oh, you're right on. But see, you still pointed to what I said was the first step. When you start taking responsibility for your life, that means you start evaluating yourself. You start looking at, for example, relationships. Are there some areas in relationships that I need to address? You know, as I mentioned, when I went through my divorce, the first thing I did was I pointed fingers at my former wife. You know, she was the problem. She was the problem. But it wasn't until I looked at myself. As a matter of fact, I'll share this story with you. After my divorce, I was really struggling with relationships, right? And there was this pattern that I date a woman and we date for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and they were all ending the same way. The women would say, I care too much about you to stay in this relationship. And I went, that makes no sense. You say you care about me, but you're leaving me. Well, after several failed relationships, I was having a pity party with a female friend of mine. I said, you know, you women talk about you want a good man and I'm a good man and why are you leaving, right? And this friend of mine said this. She said, Michael, if one person calls you a jackass, you probably shouldn't worry about it. But if 2 or more do, you might want to get a saddle. Have you not noticed that you're the only common denominator in all of your relationships? And when she said that, the light bulb came on. I went, oh my gosh, I am the problem. And so that was me being willing to take responsibility for my relationships and my life. But it took her shaking my core beliefs, right? Because I was blaming women. But when I said, oh yeah, she's right, that changed everything inside of me. I took responsibility. And now I've been blissfully married for the past 19 years as a result of recognizing that I had some stuff that I need to deal with. And I was able to deal with that stuff.
Excellent. So what's the second step, Michael?
The first step, I like to sum the first step up as awareness. That's the first thing, because in order to take responsibility for yourself, you have to be aware. You have to have the awareness that you want to change. Once we do that, then the next thing is imagination. And here's what I mean by that. Imagination is simply the imaging in of divine ideas. So if you will buy into my idea that there's this divine intelligence in the universe, this intelligence can only do one thing, and that is to love you, okay? When I use my imagination to listen to that divine intelligence, it's going to direct me and give me the insights for next steps. So imagination is key. I had to start imagining myself as an author, even though I'm sitting in the backseat of a car with no money, no nothing, but the imagination, the imaging in of those ideas started planting seeds. And so once I had the imagination and the vision of what I wanted to create, the next step is action. You have to be willing to do some things. When it came to relationships, as I talked about earlier, when my relationships weren't working, one of the things I had to be willing to do is to get honest with myself of my emotional unavailability. And so in taking that responsibility, saying, okay, I'm emotionally unavailable, so how can I fix that? I go to therapy, I fix that, I am able to create great relationships. So that next step was the action. We have to be willing to do some things differently than what we've done before.
That is so powerful. Basically, manifestation. I mean,
yep.
You thought about it and it manifested. Are people around you changing? Have you noticed that, some of your people are ascending higher, realizing, what is real?
Well, my focus actually for the last 10 years or so has been on Black male empowerment. And so when you ask if people are changing, the answer is absolutely yes. Because although this is my latest book, I've been writing about Black male issues for the past 20 years. And I actually created a platform specifically for Black men to support them in their personal transformation. And so that website is shatteringBlackMaleStereotypes.com. And on that site, there are tools that support men who are courageous enough to want to transform their lives. So in answer to your question, men are changing. Men are tired of and frustrated, I think, of the old paradigm of masculinity. And we're looking for new ways of being and relating as men. So what I have put together on this platform is an opportunity for men who are ready to transform their lives. And that's what there's several books on there. There's online courses, there's podcasts, there's a whole resource for any Black man who is committed to transforming his life.
Man, that is amazing. Can you give the website one more time?
ShatteringBlackMaleStereotypes.com. And that's actually the title of a book that I wrote, Shattering Black Male Stereotypes.
And Michael, when you go back on your tour, KG and I want to be your special guest because we have some testimonies that will co-sign exactly what you said.
Indeed.
And if I weren't sitting here, or if I didn't see it, I might not have believed it happened myself. But everything you talk about, and I've not read your book, but I sense that the book for Black men, for me, it was a lot of self-esteem issues. I was a child of integration in the early 60s, and finding my path was very difficult. My mom and dad, both educators, but dad had one way of teaching, mom had another. And there was friction, and then
I'm recording that.
Learning disabilities. It just put me in a very depressed state for a long time before I had this moment of clarity. Does your book address those low self-esteem issues, Michael?
Absolutely. And actually, there's a book prior. Well, actually, let's see. I wrote a book called "The Cure for Only: A Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose." And in that book, I deal specifically with what you were talking about. And what I love about this conversation, Larry, is that this is a conversation we as Black men need to have.
Yes.
We have to have this conversation about healing our hearts, dealing with trauma. And that's how we transform our lives. That's how we transform our community. And that's the whole platform that I've been on for the last 10 years. Black male empowerment and providing resources that support men who are courageous enough to want to transform their lives.
Excellent, man. So proud of you, Kat. So proud.
The book is, the good news is, the future is brighter than you think. The author, Coach Michael Taylor, President and CEO of Creation Publishing Group. Road, thank you for coming through. We have got to have you back on and dive deeper.
Just one quick question. How many books have you written, and are they available on your site?
Yes, I've written a total of 9 books.
Okay.
5 specifically for Black men.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm going to your site, and I'm about to bless some people because they need to open a page or 2 of your book and start to heal.
Well, Larry, I'd like to do this. I'd like to send you 5 copies of Shattering Black Male Stereotypes. And you can distribute those however you feel comfortable.
I'm honored, sir. When we close the podcast, I'll give you an address.
Perfect.
Man, thank you so much for your time and coming on.
Yeah,
thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
He's got to come back, every week.
Yeah.
He's got to come back.
Absolutely. We thank you, Coach Michael Taylor. And we will be back with more of the Public Affairs Podcast after this.